Extinction is one of the most powerful words in science. It sounds final, absolute, irreversible. When a species is declared extinct, it is assumed that the last living individual has already died, that no breeding population remains anywhere on Earth, and that the evolutionary line has permanently ended. But this declaration, as confident as it may sound, is not a moment of certainty. It is a conclusion built on absence, probability, and human limitation. To declare a species extinct, scientists must search its known habitat extensively and fail to find a single surviving individual over a significant period of time. Yet the planet is vast, complex, and still deeply unexplored. Dense rainforests, isolated islands, underground cave systems, polar regions, and especially the deep ocean remain among the least understood environments on Earth. In many of these places, humans have barely scratched the surface. Extinction, therefore, is often not a confirmed ending, but a scientific judgment based on incomplete access to reality. History has shown again and again that nature does not always follow our assumptions. Species thought to be lost forever have reappeared after decades or even centuries, alive and quietly surviving in places humans overlooked. These are known as Lazarus species, named after the biblical figure who returned from the dead. Their rediscovery forces science to confront an uncomfortable truth. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. The process of declaring extinction is shaped by practical limits. Field surveys require funding, manpower, technology, and political stability. Many regions where rare species once lived are now affected by war, illegal logging, extreme terrain, or environmental danger. Some habitats are so remote that regular surveys are impossible. Others change seasonally, hiding animals during certain periods and revealing them only briefly. A species may exist at such low population numbers that encounters become statistically rare, even for trained researchers. There is also the issue of behavior. Many animals are naturally elusive. Nocturnal habits, underground living, deep water migration, and fear of humans can all reduce the chances of detection. Some species alter their behavior dramatically when populations decline, becoming quieter, more solitary, and more cautious. As numbers drop, visibility drops with them. An animal can exist and still remain effectively invisible. The deep ocean represents the greatest blind spot of all. More than 80% of the ocean remains unmapped, unexplored, and unseen by human eyes. Pressure, darkness, and distance make direct observation extremely difficult. Even today, new large marine species are still being discovered, not in ancient fossils, but alive. This raises an important question. If large animals can remain unknown to science in the present day, how confident can we truly be when we say that an ancient marine species is gone forever? Extinction declarations are also influenced by time. A species may be declared extinct after decades without confirmed sightings, but decades are short when measured against ecological and evolutionary timescales. Some animals have life cycles that span many years. Others may retreat into inaccessible refuges when environmental pressure increases. Survival does not always require thriving. It only requires persistence. Human perception also plays a role. Sightings reported by locals, fishermen, hunters, or indigenous communities are often dismissed as folklore or misidentification. Yet these people may spend far more time in certain environments than scientists ever will. While eyewitness accounts are not proof, they are not meaningless either. Patterns of repeated sightings across generations can indicate something more than imagination. Science advances by questioning assumptions, not by ignoring inconvenient data. Technology has improved our ability to detect life, but it has not eliminated uncertainty. Camera traps, environmental DNA sampling, satellite tracking, and acoustic monitoring have revealed animals previously thought absent. In some cases, a species was only detected once technology caught up to reality. Before that moment, it was considered extinct, simply because we lacked the tools to find it. There is also a philosophical dimension to extinction. We tend to think of species as fixed categories, but nature does not operate in clean definitions. Populations fragment, adapt, hybridize, and change. A species may disappear from most of its range, but persist in a small, isolated pocket. It may change in appearance or behavior enough to be mistaken for something else. When does survival become something new, and when does extinction truly occur? The emotional weight of extinction can also influence scientific judgment. Declaring a species extinct can serve as a warning, a symbol of environmental failure, or a rallying point for conservation. Sometimes the declaration itself becomes part of a narrative, reinforcing the belief that the loss is complete. When later evidence challenges that belief, it can be met with resistance rather than curiosity. It is important to be clear. Many species truly are extinct. Countless forms of life have vanished due to climate change, habitat destruction, overhunting, and human expansion. Extinction is real, and it is accelerating. Acknowledging uncertainty does not mean denying loss. It means recognizing the limits of our knowledge while remaining open to evidence. This chapter is not about denying extinction. It is about understanding how fragile the concept can be when applied to a planet we do not fully understand. Extinction is often declared from a human perspective, shaped by where we can go, what we can see, and what tools we have available at a given moment in history. Nature does not operate on our schedules or within our assumptions. Throughout this documentary, we will explore creatures officially listed as extinct, yet surrounded by persistent reports, unexplained evidence, or biological possibilities that challenge their disappearance. Some cases are grounded in strong scientific debate. Others sit at the edge of speculation. All of them exist within the same reality. The Earth is vast, old, and still full of unknowns. The idea that something lost may still survive is not comforting. It is unsettling. It suggests that the world is less predictable than we believe, and that our understanding of life on this planet is incomplete. It forces us to accept that certainty is rare, and that even in the age of satellites and global databases, the planet can still keep secrets. Extinction, then, is not always an ending written in stone. Sometimes it is a pause in observation. Sometimes it is a mistake. And sometimes it is a reminder that the line between the known and the unknown is far thinner than we like to admit. As we move forward, each chapter will examine a different case. Some will lean closer to science, others closer to mystery. But all of them exist because extinction as a concept is not as absolute as it seems. The world has proven this before, and it may prove it again. The thylacine, the ghost of Tasmania. In September 1936, in a small concrete enclosure at Hobart Zoo in Tasmania, the last confirmed thylacine died alone. The animal, officially known as Thylacinus cynocephalus, had once ranged across mainland Australia, Tasmania, and New Guinea. By the time of its death, it had already vanished from most of its former territory. With that final captive individual, the species was declared extinct. The story, according to official records, ended there, but the silence that followed was never complete. The thylacine was not a tiger, though its striped back gave it that nickname. It was not a wolf, though its long muzzle and powerful jaws resembled one. It was a marsupial predator, a distant relative of kangaroos and wombats, occupying an ecological niche similar to wolves in other parts of the world. It hunted at night, moved with a stiff yet purposeful gait, and possessed a jaw that could open to an almost unnatural angle. Early footage from zoos shows an animal both familiar and strangely alien. Its extinction was not mysterious in cause. European settlers considered it a threat to livestock and placed bounties on its head. Thousands were killed. Habitat loss followed, and disease may have played a role. By the early 20th century, sightings became rare. The last known wild individual was shot in 1930. 6 years later, the captive thylacine died, likely from neglect and exposure to cold. Yet almost immediately after its extinction was declared, reports began to surface. Farmers claimed to see striped shapes at dusk. Bushmen described tracks unlike those of dogs. Campers reported eerie coughing calls echoing through dense forests. Over the decades, these reports did not fade. They multiplied. Some were vague, others were detailed, specific, and consistent. They described an animal with a stiff tail, horizontal stripes across the lower back, and a distinctive bounding movement. Tasmania is not an empty island, but much of it remains rugged and sparsely populated. Dense rainforests cover vast regions, while mountain ranges cut through its interior. Deep valleys and remote plateaus remain difficult to access even today. Satellite imagery may map the land, but it cannot reveal every creature beneath the canopy. Skeptics argue that sightings are misidentifications. Feral dogs, foxes, or even large quolls seen in poor light could explain many reports. Memory is unreliable. The idea of a lost predator surviving in the wild captures imagination. Once planted, the image can shape perception, but some reports are harder to dismiss. In the 1,960 seconds, a farmer claimed to have shot and killed an animal resembling a thylacine, but he buried it without preserving the body. In the 1,980 seconds, wildlife officers investigated a series of tracks found in remote areas. Plaster casts were made, measurements were compared, and the prints did not match common known animals. Still, without a body or clear photograph, the evidence remained inconclusive. The most famous modern footage emerged in the early 21st century. Grainy video captured what appeared to be a striped animal moving through thick undergrowth. The image quality was poor, and analysis divided experts. Some saw a dog, others argued the gait was wrong, the tail too rigid, the body proportions distinctive. The debate continues. What makes the thylacine case persist is not a single piece of dramatic evidence. It is the pattern. Consistent descriptions across decades, reports from experienced outdoorsmen with nothing to gain. Locations that align with the animal's historical habitat. Each report alone may be weak, but together they create a statistical anomaly. Biologically, could a small population have survived unnoticed? Large predators require territory, prey, and breeding pairs. The thylacine was not tiny. Sustaining a viable population would require dozens, possibly hundreds, of individuals to avoid inbreeding collapse. That seems unlikely in a relatively small island. Yet Tasmania's western wilderness is vast and thinly populated. Some regions receive few human visitors each year. There is also precedent. The mice species, once believed extinct, have been rediscovered after long absences. Small populations can persist in ecological refuges. Animals under heavy hunting pressure often retreat into the most inaccessible terrain. If even a handful of thylacines avoided early persecution, they may have shifted their behavior to become more nocturnal and more secretive. Modern technology has entered the search. Camera traps have been deployed. Drones have scanned forests. Environmental DNA sampling has been attempted in waterways. So far, no conclusive genetic proof has surfaced. Yet, absence of detection is not final proof of absence. Camera traps only record what passes directly in front of them. Environmental DNA degrades quickly in harsh conditions. Another factor complicates the story. De-extinction science. In recent years, genetic material from preserved thylacine specimens has been sequenced. Research teams have explored the possibility of reconstructing the species through advanced gene editing techniques. The idea is controversial, technically complex, and ethically debated. But it has brought renewed attention to the thylacine. If science is attempting to bring it back, the public inevitably asks whether it might not be fully gone. Some conservationists warn that belief in survival can undermine protection efforts for other species. If people believe extinction can be reversed or avoided, urgency may weaken. Others argue the opposite. Hope can drive funding, research, and preservation of wilderness areas that might otherwise be neglected. Beyond science, the thylacine has become a symbol. It represents the cost of human expansion, the fragility of ecosystems, and the possibility that nature may resist complete erasure. The animal's image appears in art, documentaries, and cultural narratives. It walks through collective memory as a ghost of what was lost. But symbolism does not create tracks in the mud. The most compelling aspect of the mystery is behavioral consistency in eyewitness accounts. Witnesses often describe the same unusual details: the stiff tail extending straight behind the body, the way it carries its head low, the distinctive stripes only on the rear half. These are not common features in dogs. misidentification is possible, but repeated similarity suggests something deeper. Scientifically, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. A clear photograph, a verified DNA sample, or a captured specimen would settle the debate instantly. Until then, the thylacine exists in a liminal state, officially extinct, unofficially alive in reports. The ecology of Tasmania today could, in theory, support a small, carnivorous marsupial predator. Wallabies, possums, and smaller mammals remain abundant in some regions. But human presence is limited in western wilderness zones. However, road networks and modern development have expanded significantly since the early 20th century. Any surviving population would face new pressures. There is also the question of genetics. A very small population would suffer from reduced genetic diversity. Over time, inbreeding depression could weaken viability. Unless the surviving group was larger than assumed, long-term survival would be biologically difficult. Yet difficulty is not impossibility. The thylacine case forces us to confront an uncomfortable reality. Extinction declarations are not based on witnessing the last breath. They are based on probability curves, survey efforts, and elapsed time without confirmation. A species becomes extinct in records when the likelihood of survival falls below a threshold deemed negligible. Negligible does not mean zero. In recent years, Australian authorities have taken renewed interest in reported sightings, not because proof has emerged, but because the volume and consistency of reports have not faded. Some scientists remain skeptical but open-minded. Others dismiss the idea entirely. The debate reflects a broader tension within science itself. How much uncertainty should be tolerated before closure is declared? The thylacine may indeed be gone. Its ecological role may now be empty, its evolutionary line permanently severed. But the continued reports suggest that the story might not be so simple. Even if every sighting proves to be misidentification, the persistence of belief reveals something important about extinction. It is not only a biological event, it is a psychological one. As long as there are forests left unsearched and nights unobserved, the possibility, however small, remains. In the end, the thylacine stands at the intersection of science and mystery. It is a test case for how we define loss. It challenges the assumption that once declared gone, a species must remain so without question. It reminds us that the Earth, even in the modern age, still holds shadows. Whether the ghost of Tasmania still moves through those shadows is unknown, but the question itself refuses to die. The ivory-billed woodpecker, the bird that vanished twice. In the dense bottomland forests of the southeastern United States, there once lived a bird so large and striking that it seemed almost prehistoric. The ivory-billed woodpecker, scientifically known as Camphophilus principalis, was one of the largest woodpeckers in the world. It possessed a powerful ivory-colored bill, bold black and white plumage, and a wingspan that could exceed 75 centimeters. When it flew, witnesses described white trailing edges flashing against the dark forest canopy. When it called, the sound carried through swamps and hardwood forests like a distant trumpet. By the mid-20th century, that sound had faded. The primary cause was not mystery but logging. Vast tracts of old-growth bottomland forest were cut down during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. These ancient forests contained the large dead and dying trees the ivory-billed woodpecker depended on for food. Unlike smaller woodpeckers that peck for insects near the surface, the ivory-bill specialized in scaling bark off large trees to access beetle larvae beneath. It required mature ecosystems with extensive decay cycles. As logging intensified, habitat collapsed. Hunting for specimens further reduced numbers. By the 1932 and 1940, sightings became rare. The last widely accepted recordings and photographs came from a small population in Louisiana. After that, the species seemed to disappear. In 1944, the ivory-billed woodpecker was widely considered extinct. Yet, like the thylacine, its story refused to end. Occasional reports emerged from remote swamps in Arkansas, Florida, and Louisiana. Hunters claimed to see a large black and white bird with extensive white on the wings. Birdwatchers reported hearing distinctive double knocks, a rapid two-beat drumming sound believed to be characteristic of the species, but no clear photograph or physical evidence surfaced. The idea of extinction hardened into assumption. Decades passed. The bird was placed on endangered lists and eventually treated as gone. Then, in 2004, something changed. A kayaker in Arkansas reported seeing a large woodpecker with white on its wings flying through the Cache River, National Wildlife Refuge. The sighting was brief but vivid. It triggered an intensive search effort involving ornithologists, government agencies, and conservation groups. Audio recordings captured sounds resembling the double knock associated with the ivory bill. A short video clip, blurred and distant, appeared to show a large woodpecker with white trailing edges in flight. The announcement electrified the scientific community. In 2005, researchers cautiously declared that the ivory-billed woodpecker might still exist. The news spread worldwide, and hope surged. If a species declared extinct for 60 years could survive, then extinction itself became less certain, but controversy followed immediately. Skeptics argued that the video was too unclear to confirm identity. The white patterns could match the pileated woodpecker, a common large species in the region. Audio recordings of double knocks could be produced by other natural sounds or different birds. Without a clear image or physical evidence, the claim remained disputed. The debate became intense, even polarized. Some ornithologists believed strongly that the bird survived in remote southern swamps. Others insisted the evidence was insufficient. Funding for large-scale searches fluctuated as confidence rose and fell. What makes the ivory-billed woodpecker case unique is that it has effectively been declared extinct twice. After the initial disappearance in the 1940s, hope flickered but gradually faded. Then the 2004 reports reignited belief. When subsequent searches failed to produce definitive proof, many agencies again moved toward declaring the species extinct. Yet small teams continue to report possible sightings even today. The habitat itself complicates the matter. Bottomland hardwood forests are among the most difficult environments to survey. dense vegetation, flooded terrain, and limited accessibility make systematic observation challenging. A bird that ranges over large territories could avoid detection for years, especially if population numbers are extremely low. The ivory-bill was known to require vast home ranges. A single breeding pair might occupy several square kilometers. If only a handful of individuals remain scattered across fragmented habitats, encounters would be exceedingly rare. There is also behavioral ecology to consider. Under intense pressure, species often alter behavior. Increased wariness, reduced vocalization, and avoidance of open flight paths could reduce visibility. A bird that once called loudly might become silent. A species that once foraged conspicuously might retreat deeper into swamp interiors. Skeptics counter with population dynamics. For a species to survive long-term, it must maintain a viable breeding population. Genetic diversity declines rapidly in small groups. Without sufficient numbers, extinction becomes inevitable even if individuals persist temporarily. So the question becomes not only whether a single bird survives, but whether a sustainable population exists. The difficulty lies in evidence. In absence of confirmation does not equal absence of existence. Yet science requires reproducible proof. The blurred Arkansas video remains central to the debate. Frame-by-frame analysis has been conducted, wing beat patterns measured, plumage patterns compared, and conclusions remain divided. Acoustic evidence adds complexity. The ivory-billed woodpecker was known for its double knock, two rapid taps produced by striking wood. Recordings from search teams captured similar sounds. But wood can produce similar noises when falling branches strike trunks. Other woodpecker species can create double taps as well. Each piece of evidence alone is ambiguous. Collectively, they suggest possibility, but not certainty. The psychological dimension of rediscovery cannot be ignored. Conservation biology often grapples with grief. Extinction announcements carry emotional weight. Rediscovery offers redemption. The desire for survival can influence interpretation. Confirmation bias can shape analysis. At the same time, excessive skepticism can close the door prematurely. The ivory bill occupies this fragile middle ground. There are historical precedents for long-lost bird species reappearing. The takahe in New Zealand was thought extinct for 50 years before being rediscovered in remote alpine valleys. Other species have resurfaced after decades without confirmed sightings. These examples remind scientists that incomplete surveys can lead to premature conclusions. But there are also many cases where hope faded and extinction proved real. The southeastern United States today is not the untouched wilderness it once was. Logging, agriculture, urban expansion, and infrastructure have altered landscapes extensively. Remaining bottomland forests are fragmented. Whether they can sustain a large, specialized woodpecker remains uncertain. If the ivory-billed woodpecker survives, it likely does so in extremely low numbers, perhaps a few pairs in isolated pockets. Such populations would be fragile, vulnerable to storms, disease, and genetic decline. The longer confirmation remains elusive, the harder survival becomes statistically. And yet, reports continue. Experienced birders occasionally describe brief glimpses of a large black and white bird with unusual wing patterns. Hunters report hearing distinct double knocks in remote areas. Wildlife cameras have occasionally captured ambiguous shapes. None have met the evidentiary threshold required for scientific consensus. The case highlights a broader issue in extinction science. How long must a species go undetected before it is considered gone? Decades? A century? At what point does probability outweigh possibility? Official extinction declarations often rely on models estimating detection probability. If repeated intensive surveys fail to find evidence, the likelihood of survival drops below a certain threshold. But models depend on assumptions about detection rates, habitat coverage, and population behavior. If any of those assumptions are flawed, conclusions shift. In 2021, the United States Fish and Wildlife Service proposed declaring the ivory-billed woodpecker extinct. The proposal reignited debate. Some scientists supported it, citing decades of failed searches. Others argued that remote habitats remain undersurveyed and that declaring extinction might halt remaining search efforts prematurely. The bird's status remains contentious. Beyond biology, the ivory bill has become symbolic. It represents the cost of habitat destruction in North America. It embodies both the tragedy of loss and the stubborn persistence of hope. Its image appears in conservation campaigns, documentaries, and scientific discussions about uncertainty. Whether the ivory-billed woodpecker still flies through southern swamps may never be fully resolved without definitive proof. But its story reveals something fundamental about extinction. Disappearance is rarely witnessed directly. It is inferred. And inference, no matter how rigorous, leaves room for doubt. In the silent, flooded forests of Arkansas and Louisiana, trees still rot and insects still burrow beneath bark. The ecological niche once filled by the ivory bill may not be entirely empty. Somewhere, in the shadows of cypress trunks and tangled vines, a large woodpecker could, in theory, still exist. Or it may not. The uncertainty itself is the point. The ivory-billed woodpecker teaches that extinction is often declared in the absence of evidence rather than in the presence of finality. It reminds us that even in regions heavily studied for centuries, complete knowledge remains elusive. Declared extinct once, possibly rediscovered, then doubted again, the ivory-billed woodpecker stands as a case study in scientific humility. Whether alive or truly gone, it forces us to confront the limits of certainty, and in those limits, possibility persists. The Megalodon beyond the fossil record. More than 3 million years ago, an ocean predator ruled the seas with a scale that dwarfed anything alive today. Otodus megalodon, commonly known simply as Megalodon, was not just a large shark. It was an apex predator that may have reached lengths exceeding 15 meters, with jaws capable of exerting crushing bite forces unmatched in marine history. Fossilized teeth, some larger than a human hand, are found across the world's oceans, embedded in ancient sediments that record a time when marine ecosystems were very different from those we know today. According to mainstream paleontology, Megalodon went extinct around 3.6 million years ago during the late Pliocene. Climatic shifts, changes in ocean currents, and the decline of warm coastal habitats likely reduced its prey base. Competition from emerging predators, including early great white sharks and marine mammals adapted to cooler waters, may have further pressured the species. Over time, its dominance faded from the fossil record. And yet, Megalodon persists in popular imagination more than almost any other extinct animal. The idea that a prehistoric super-predator might still roam the deep ocean exerts a powerful psychological pull. It plays on two fundamental realities. First, the ocean is vast and largely unexplored. Second, Megalodon once existed in exactly that environment. If any extinct creature could theoretically remain hidden, it would be one that lived in deep marine ecosystems. To approach this question seriously, we must separate scientific evidence from speculation. The fossil record of Megalodon is extensive. Thousands of teeth have been found across multiple continents. These fossils appear abundantly in Miocene and Pliocene sediments, then abruptly disappear in younger geological layers. This pattern strongly supports extinction millions of years ago. If Megalodon had survived into the recent past, we would expect to find at least some teeth in more recent sediments. Sharks shed teeth continuously throughout their lives. A single individual can lose thousands over decades. If a breeding population of massive sharks existed in the modern ocean, their teeth would likely be discovered in recent deposits. Yet none have been found. This is one of the strongest arguments against survival. However, the ocean remains one of the least understood environments on Earth. More than 80% of it has not been directly explored. Deep-sea trenches descend thousands of meters below the surface, beyond regular human access. Entire ecosystems exist in darkness under crushing pressure. New species of fish, squid, and even large invertebrates are still being discovered today. Does this leave room for a giant prehistoric shark? Biologically, the answer becomes more complicated. Megalodon is believed to have been a coastal predator, favoring warm, shallow seas rich in marine mammals. Fossil evidence suggests it preyed heavily on whales. Bite marks on ancient whale bones match Megalodon tooth morphology. Its size and energy demands would have required a substantial and consistent food supply. If it survived into modern times, it would need an ecosystem capable of supporting such a massive predator. Today's oceans do contain large whales, but they are far less abundant than in pre-industrial times. Commercial whaling drastically reduced whale populations in the 19th and 20th centuries. If Megalodon had somehow persisted into that era, the sudden collapse of whale numbers would have severely impacted its food supply. Another factor is temperature. Megalodon thrived in warmer climates. Global cooling trends during the Pliocene and subsequent ice ages likely restricted its preferred habitats. Modern oceans include cold, deep regions where large predators exist, but Megalodon's fossil distribution suggests a preference for warmer waters. Some argue that if Megalodon survived, it may have adapted to deep-sea environments, avoiding detection by living at extreme depths, but such adaptation would require significant physiological change. Large endothermic sharks, such as the great white, can regulate body temperature to some extent. Whether Megalodon possess similar abilities remains debated, but deep ocean survival would still demand sufficient prey density. There have been occasional reports of enormous unidentified sharks. Fishermen have described massive dorsal fins. Unexplained bite marks have appeared on whale carcasses. Viral videos claim to show gigantic shapes beneath the water's surface. However, none of these reports have provided verifiable evidence of a 15-meter predator. Most large shark sightings can be attributed to known species. The basking shark, for example, can reach lengths over 10 meters and may appear even larger due to perspective distortions. The whale shark, the largest living fish, can exceed 12 meters. When seen briefly or partially submerged, size estimation becomes unreliable. The concept of deep-sea gigantism also fuels speculation. Certain deep-sea species grow unusually large compared to their shallow water relatives. Giant squid, once considered mythical, were eventually filmed alive for centuries. Sailors reported enormous tentacled creatures dragging ships. Science dismissed these stories until physical evidence emerged. This precedent encourages belief that large unknown animals may still exist. Yet giant squid were known from carcasses long before live footage confirmed them. Their existence was supported by tangible remains. No comparable modern remains of Megalodon have surfaced, no fresh teeth, no recent skeletal fragments, no verified tissue samples. Another argument sometimes presented is that the deep ocean floor is poorly preserved in the fossil record, meaning absence of recent fossils may not prove extinction. While true that deep-sea fossilization differs from shallow marine environments, coastal and continental shelf areas do preserve shark teeth well. If Megalodon were still present in any significant numbers, evidence would likely appear. The ecological consequences of a surviving Megalodon would also be substantial. An apex predator of that scale would influence marine ecosystems dramatically. Patterns of whale migration, shark population distribution, and marine mammal behavior would reflect its presence. No such patterns have been documented. It is important to recognize why the idea persists. The ocean represents the unknown in a way that land no longer does. Satellite imagery has mapped continents extensively. Even remote jungles are increasingly surveyed. But the ocean's depth and opacity create a psychological space where prehistoric survival feels plausible. Megalodon also embodies evolutionary awe. Its existence reminds us that Earth's past was populated by giants. Imagining that such a creature might still exist connects modern reality to ancient history in a direct and thrilling way. However, from a strictly scientific perspective, survival is highly improbable. The fossil record shows a clear extinction boundary. Ecological requirements suggest unsustainable modern conditions. Lack of physical evidence strongly argues against ongoing existence. While the ocean is vast, large breeding populations of massive predators are difficult to conceal indefinitely. That said, the broader lesson remains relevant. The deep ocean still harbors unknown species. New large fish are occasionally discovered. Entire hydrothermal vent communities were unknown until the late 20th century. Our understanding of deep marine biodiversity is incomplete, but unknown does not mean prehistoric. Megalodon's extinction likely reflects real evolutionary turnover. As climates cooled and ecosystems shifted, new predators rose. The great white shark, though smaller, became a dominant apex predator. Toothed whales diversified and expanded. Marine food webs reorganized. Extinction, in this case, appears consistent with geological evidence. Yet Megalodon remains an important chapter in this documentary, not because it likely survives, but because it illustrates the boundary between scientific possibility and popular imagination. It forces us to examine how much uncertainty truly exists in unexplored environments and where evidence must draw the line. There is a difference between mystery and denial. Mystery acknowledges gaps in knowledge. Denial rejects strong evidence in favor of hope. In the case of Megalodon, mystery exists in the deep ocean broadly, but evidence of this specific predator's survival remains absent. Still, the image endures. Somewhere in the dark, beneath layers of cold water and silent pressure, a shadow large enough to eclipse a boat stirs the imagination. It reminds us that the planet once hosted creatures of extraordinary scale, whether gone or lingering only in fossilized teeth. Megalodon symbolizes the tension between what we know and what we fear might still be hidden. And in that tension lies the enduring power of extinction as a concept. The quagga, could extinction be reversed? In the 19th century, travelers crossing the plains of southern Africa described herds of animals that looked like zebras fading into horses. Their heads and necks bore bold black and white stripes, but toward the rear, the pattern dissolved into brown, leaving the hindquarters nearly unstriped. This animal was known as the quagga, a subspecies of plains zebra scientifically named Equus quagga quagga. By 1883, the last known quagga died in captivity at the Amsterdam Zoo. Relentless hunting by European settlers and habitat transformation had eliminated wild populations decades earlier. Like many extinction stories of that era, the quagga vanished before conservation awareness truly existed. It was declared extinct, catalogued in museum collections, and remembered only through faded photographs and preserved skins. But the quagga story is unlike the others, because unlike the thylacine, or the ivory-billed woodpecker, the quagga may not be entirely gone in a genetic sense. For over a century, scientists assumed the quagga was a distinct species, completely separate from other zebras. However, in the 1980 seconds, advances in genetic analysis allowed researchers to examine DNA from preserved museum specimens. The results were surprising. The quagga was not a separate species at all. It was a southern subspecies of the plains zebra Equus quagga. In other words, the animal declared extinct still shared the vast majority of its genetic material with living zebras. This revelation changed everything. If the quagga was simply a regional color variant of plains zebra, then perhaps its distinctive appearance could be recreated through selective breeding among modern plains zebras. Stripe patterns vary naturally. Some individuals show reduced striping on the hindquarters, resembling historical quagga photographs. This idea led to the creation of the Quagga Project in South Africa, initiated in 1987. The project aimed to selectively breed plains zebras that displayed quagga-like traits. By choosing individuals with fewer hindquarter stripes and breeding them over multiple generations, researchers hoped to produce animals that visually matched the extinct quagga. Over decades, the results became increasingly striking. Some modern-bred individuals now display reduced striping and brownish hindquarters, remarkably similar to preserved quagga specimens. To an untrained eye, they appear almost identical to the animals photographed in the 19th century. But this raises a profound question. If an animal looks like a quagga, behaves like a quagga, and occupies the same ecological niche, is it truly the same animal? Genetically, these bred zebras are plains zebras. They do not contain DNA uniquely recovered from quagga remains. Instead, the breeding process amplifies traits already present within the living gene pool. The Quagga Project does not resurrect the exact genome of the extinct population. It recreates a phenotype, an outward appearance. This distinction is crucial. Extinction traditionally means the irreversible loss of a unique genetic lineage once the final individual dies. That specific combination of genes disappears forever. Selective breeding does not recover lost genes. It rearranges existing ones. Yet the quagga challenges how we define extinction itself. If the original quagga was genetically almost identical to living plains zebras, was its extinction truly the disappearance of a unique species, or the loss of a regional variant? In evolutionary terms, subspecies represent localized adaptations. Losing one reduces biodiversity, even if the broader species survives. The Quagga Project blurs the boundary between extinction and continuity. There is also an ecological dimension. Historically, quaggas roamed specific regions of South Africa's grasslands. Their grazing patterns likely influenced vegetation dynamics and interacted with other herbivores. Modern, selectively bred quagga, like zebras, have been reintroduced into parts of that range. Their presence may restore some aspects of historical ecosystem function. In this sense, the project is not merely aesthetic. It aims to recover ecological roles. Critics argue that recreating appearance does not restore lost evolutionary history. The original quagga population evolved under specific environmental pressures over thousands of years. Its exact behavioral patterns, social structures, and subtle genetic adaptations cannot be fully reconstructed through selective breeding alone. Supporters counter that extinction is not always absolute when genetic continuity remains. If most of the quagga genome persists within living plains zebras, then selective breeding is not resurrection, but restoration. Modern biotechnology introduces even more complexity. Advances in genome editing, such as CRISPR techniques, raise the possibility of more precise genetic reconstruction. If sufficient DNA from preserved quagga specimens could be sequenced, theoretically, targeted edits could move living zebras closer to the original genome. This concept falls under the broader field of de-extinction. De-extinction does not mean reversing time. It involves using biotechnology to recreate organisms that resemble extinct species genetically or phenotypically. Proposals have included resurrecting woolly mammoths through editing elephant DNA and reviving extinct birds using closely related living species. The quagga represents one of the earliest and most practical examples of this concept, achieved not through gene editing, but through traditional breeding. But should extinction be reversible? Some conservationists warn that de-extinction efforts may divert resources from protecting endangered species that still exist. Saving living biodiversity may be more urgent than recreating what has already been lost. Others argue that de-extinction technologies could enhance conservation by restoring lost ecological functions and increasing public engagement. There is also the philosophical question of authenticity. If a recreated animal fills the same niche and resembles the extinct one, but differs slightly at the genetic level, is it genuine? Nature itself constantly reshapes genomes through mutation and selection. No species remains genetically static. Over centuries, even without extinction, populations change. Perhaps the idea of a fixed, pure, original genome is itself an illusion. The quagga case also reveals how classification shapes perception. For decades, the quagga was considered a separate species. Its extinction symbolized irreversible loss. When genetic evidence reclassified it as a subspecies, the narrative shifted. Extinction became less final. Taxonomy is not merely labeling. It influences conservation priorities, emotional responses, and scientific interpretation. If the quagga had never been separated from plain zebra in classification, its disappearance might have been seen as regional decline rather than total extinction. The word extinct carries enormous weight. It implies permanent. The quagga challenges that permanence. Today, quagga, like zebras, roam private reserves and protected areas in South Africa. Visitors can see animals that closely resemble those lost in the 19th century. They graze under the same sun, move across similar landscapes, and interact with other wildlife. Are they ghosts of extinction, or proof that extinction can sometimes be softened by genetic continuity? The broader lesson extends beyond one zebra subspecies. As genetic technology advances, the boundary between extinction and survival becomes increasingly blurred. DNA stored in museum specimens, frozen tissue banks, and preserved remains may one day contribute to partial restoration of lost forms. But restoration is not identical to original existence. The quagga story forces us to reconsider what it means for something to be gone. If genes persist in related populations, is extinction absolute? If ecological roles can be restored, does that mitigate loss? If appearance can be recreated, does that matter biologically or culturally? In strict scientific terms, the original quagga population of the 19th century is extinct. That precise genetic lineage ended in 1883. No breeding individual from that population survives. Yet its genetic legacy persists within plains zebras. Extinction, in this case, is not a clean severing. It is a reduction, a narrowing of variation. The quagga's unique patterning once represented diversity within the species. That diversity was diminished by human action. Through selective breeding, humans now attempt to rebuild what they once erased. This raises ethical symmetry. The same species that caused extinction now attempts partial restoration. Responsibility and technology intersect. The quagga does not fit neatly into the category of creatures that may still be secretly alive in remote wilderness. Instead, it represents a different challenge to extinction. It shows that sometimes extinction is not disappearance into the unknown, but transformation within the known. The line between gone and present is not always absolute. In the coming decades, advances in genomics may push this boundary further. We may see more attempts to recreate lost subspecies or approximate extinct animals through genetic engineering. Whether this constitutes true revival or symbolic reconstruction will remain debated. But the quagga stands as proof that extinction is not always as final as it appears. Sometimes the past leaves enough of itself behind that, with patience and intention, fragments can be assembled again. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough to make us question whether extinction is always the end. The Moa giants that may have escaped time long before humans ever reached the islands of New Zealand, a lineage of enormous flightless birds dominated the landscape. These were the Moa, members of the order Deinonythiformes, some species towering over 3 meters tall when fully upright. Unlike ostriches or emus, Moa had no visible wings at all. They evolved in isolation for millions of years, filling ecological roles usually occupied by large mammals elsewhere in the world. In the absence of terrestrial predators, they grew immense. Forests, shrublands, and grasslands across both the North and South Islands provided abundant vegetation. Different species of Moa occupied different niches. Some browsed in forests, others grazed in open plains. Their diversity was remarkable. Then, in the 13th century, humans arrived. The first Polynesian settlers, ancestors of the Maori people, reached New Zealand around 1250 to 1300 CE. Within roughly 2 centuries, all known species of Moa were gone. Hunting pressure was intense. Large, slow-breeding birds provided abundant meat. Eggs were collected. Habitat was altered by fire and land clearing. Archaeological evidence suggests that Moa extinction occurred rapidly by the early 1400s. They were likely extinct, or were they? The official scientific position is clear. No confirmed Moa remains date beyond the 15th century. Subfossil bones are common, often well preserved in caves and wetlands, but they belong to individuals long dead. No verified modern sightings, photographs, or physical evidence confirm survival into recent centuries. And yet, stories persist. Maori oral traditions include accounts of large birds surviving in remote regions after widespread hunting. Some traditions speak of encounters between early settlers and giant birds in isolated valleys. While oral history cannot be treated as direct biological evidence, it does reflect lived experiences. In some cases, oral traditions preserve accurate ecological information across generations. During the 19th century, European settlers occasionally reported seeing large, strange birds in remote mountainous areas. These reports were often dismissed as misidentifications or exaggerations. New Zealand's terrain includes vast, rugged regions, particularly in the Southern Alps and dense forested valleys of the South Island. Even today, some of these areas remain sparsely populated and difficult to access. The idea that a small population of moa could have survived undetected for centuries challenges probability but not physical possibility. New Zealand's topography includes deep fjords, isolated basins, and high alpine valleys where human presence has historically been limited. However, biological constraints complicate the scenario. Moa were large herbivores. Sustaining a breeding population would require sufficient food, habitat continuity, and genetic diversity. Even if a small group had retreated into remote terrain during early human settlement, long-term survival would depend on avoiding hunting and maintaining reproduction. Large animals leave evidence. Footprints, droppings, feathers, nests, bones. Modern wildlife surveys, including aerial mapping, camera traps, and ecological monitoring, have not produced any confirmed moa evidence. If a breeding population survived into modern times, it would likely leave detectable traces. But consider another factor: human expectation. Once extinction is assumed, searches often cease. Early surveys of remote regions may not have been systematic, and 19th century explorers focused on mapping and settlement rather than biological census. By the time scientific fieldwork intensified, centuries had passed. Some advocates of moa survival argue that the birds may have shifted behavior under hunting pressure, becoming more nocturnal and more reclusive. Similar behavioral changes are observed in other hunted species worldwide. Animals adapt to avoid humans, yet moa lacked natural predators before human arrival. Their evolutionary history did not prepare them for sustained predation. They reproduced relatively slowly, laying only 1 or 2 eggs at a time, depending on species. This reproductive rate makes recovery from intense hunting difficult. Another intriguing aspect involves the discovery of relatively recent subfossil remains. Some moa bones appear less degraded than expected for medieval-age specimens. However, radiocarbon dating consistently places them within the known extinction window. Scientific consensus remains firm. Moa are extinct, so why include them in this documentary? Because the moa represent a boundary case between myth and measurable possibility. They illustrate how human memory, folklore, and incomplete early records can blur the timeline of extinction. They also highlight how rapidly humans can eliminate even the largest species in isolated ecosystems. There is also a psychological dimension. New Zealand's environment still feels ancient in many places. Dense forests shrouded in mist, mountain valleys rarely visited. Landscapes that appear unchanged for millennia. In such settings, the imagination easily populates shadows with giant birds. Cryptozoological communities occasionally report sightings of large wingless birds in remote regions. These accounts lack physical evidence and are generally rejected by mainstream science. But their persistence reflects a broader pattern. Extinction declarations do not always erase cultural memory. Modern ecological tools provide additional perspective. Environmental DNA sampling, which detects genetic traces in soil and water, has revolutionized species detection. If moa were still present in even small numbers, environmental DNA analysis might reveal their genetic signatures. So far, no such evidence has been reported. The absence of evidence grows stronger with time. Yet, extinction is not merely a biological event, it is also a lesson. The moa demonstrate how fragile, isolated ecosystems can be when confronted by new predators. They evolved in a mammal-free environment, growing large in safety. When humans arrived, their evolutionary strategy became a vulnerability. They had no fear response to hunters, no instinctive defense against coordinated predation. Their disappearance reshaped New Zealand's ecology. Forests that evolved under moa browsing pressure changed after their loss. Certain plant species may have depended on moa for seed dispersal. The extinction of one group can ripple through entire ecosystems. If, hypothetically, a small moa population had survived into recent centuries, their ecological impact would be detectable. Browsing patterns, plant regeneration, and nutrient cycling would reflect their presence. Modern ecological studies do not show such influence, and yet uncertainty remains in the margins. The most remote alpine valleys and dense forest interiors were not comprehensively surveyed until relatively recently. It is theoretically possible that a small population persisted longer than documented, perhaps into the 17th or 18th century, before finally disappearing. Extinction dates often reflect last confirmed evidence, not necessarily the absolute last individual. This distinction matters. A species may linger in low numbers for decades or centuries after assumed extinction. These terminal populations, sometimes called ghost populations, survive briefly before genetic decline or random events finish what human pressure began. In the case of moa, such lingering survival remains speculative, but not impossible. However, survival into the modern era appears extremely unlikely based on current evidence. Including moa in this exploration emphasizes an important principle. Extinction is often a process rather than a moment. The final individual rarely dies under observation. Instead, species fade gradually, slipping below detection thresholds before vanishing entirely. The moa likely followed this pattern. After intense hunting reduced numbers dramatically, small scattered groups may have persisted briefly in remote areas. Eventually, reproductive rates could not compensate for mortality. Genetic bottlenecks intensified, extinction became inevitable. But because humans did not witness the exact moment of final disappearance, the possibility of extended survival lingers in imagination. The moa also represent a warning. If large dominant herbivores could vanish within 2 centuries of human arrival, what does that imply for modern species under pressure? The story underscores how quickly ecological giants can fall. While scientific evidence strongly supports moa extinction centuries ago, their narrative belongs in this documentary because it illustrates how extinction timelines can blur, how oral history can preserve echoes of reality, and how the absence of complete records leaves room for speculation. Extinction may not always be witnessed, but its consequences endure. The forests of New Zealand no longer echo with the heavy footsteps of giant birds. Their bones rest in caves and riverbanks. Their image survives in reconstructions and museum displays. Whether any survive beyond recorded history may never be fully proven. But the possibility, however slim, reminds us of something essential. Even when extinction appears certain, the final chapter is rarely observed directly, and in that unobserved gap between certainty and disappearance, imagination persists. The Caribbean monk seal sightings after extinction. For centuries, along the warm turquoise waters of the Caribbean Sea, a sleek marine mammal hauled itself onto sandy beaches and coral cays. It rested in colonies, basked in sunlight, and slipped quietly back into shallow coastal waters to hunt fish and crustaceans. This animal was the Caribbean monk seal, scientifically known as Neomonachus tropicalis. It was the only seal species native to the tropical western Atlantic. Today, it is officially extinct. The Caribbean monk seal was first described by European explorers in the late 15th century. Christopher Columbus and his crew encountered large numbers of seals in the region during their voyages. Early sailors hunted them heavily for meat and oil. Unlike cold water seals that inhabit remote polar coasts, the Caribbean monk seal lived in warm, accessible tropical waters. This accessibility would prove fatal. Throughout the following centuries, exploitation continued. Seals were easy targets when hauled out on beaches. Colonies were disturbed repeatedly as human settlement expanded across the Caribbean basin. Habitat pressure intensified. Fishing competition increased. Coastal development altered breeding grounds. By the late 19th century, sightings had become rare. The last confirmed specimen was killed in 1952 at Serenilla Bank, between Jamaica and Honduras. Despite sporadic reports afterward, no verified individuals were documented. In 2008, after decades without confirmed evidence, the United States officially declared the Caribbean monk seal extinct. But the ocean complicates extinction. Unlike terrestrial species, marine mammals inhabit environments that are far more difficult to monitor. Vast stretches of ocean, remote coral reefs, and uninhabited islands create countless blind spots. Even large whales, some exceeding 20 meters in length, were poorly understood until recent decades. Some species were only formally described by science in the 20th century, despite their size. The Caribbean monk seal lived in shallow coastal regions, but its full range may have extended into remote banks and reefs rarely visited by researchers. The Western Caribbean contains numerous isolated atolls, submerged platforms, and cays where human presence is limited. After 1952, fishermen and sailors occasionally reported sightings of seal-like animals in tropical waters. Some described small groups resting on sandbars. Others claimed to see solitary individuals surfacing briefly before diving again. These reports were never confirmed with photographs or specimens. Skeptics argue that such sightings likely involved misidentifications. The region contains other marine mammals, including manatees and various dolphin species. In poor light or at distance, shape and movement can be misinterpreted. The mind fills gaps quickly, especially when the idea of a lost species persists culturally. However, marine mammal rediscoveries have occurred before. The Mediterranean monk seal and the Hawaiian monk seal, close relatives of the Caribbean species, have both experienced dramatic population declines but survive in fragmented numbers. The Caribbean monk seal belonged to the same evolutionary lineage. Its extinction removed an entire branch from the Atlantic ecosystem. Biologically, could a small population have survived unnoticed? Monk seals are coastal and typically form colonies for breeding. They are not deep-sea animals. They rely on beaches and shallow reefs. A viable population would likely require multiple breeding individuals, which increases detectability. Seals haul out onto land. They leave tracks, carcasses, and observable behavior. This makes long-term undetected survival challenging. Yet the Caribbean region includes politically unstable zones, remote maritime borders, and undersurveyed reefs. Some banks are visited only by fishermen operating without formal reporting. A small, highly cautious population could, in theory, avoid regular human contact for extended periods. Genetic bottlenecks pose another challenge. If a handful of individuals survive beyond the mid-20th century, maintaining sufficient genetic diversity would be difficult. Inbreeding reduces fertility and increases vulnerability to disease. Marine mammals with low numbers often struggle to recover. No environmental DNA studies have yet confirmed the presence of Caribbean monk seal genetic material in modern waters. Environmental DNA sampling in marine systems can detect trace genetic fragments left behind by organisms. Such technology has revealed elusive fish and invertebrates in recent years. Absence of monk seal DNA suggests absence of living individuals, though sampling coverage is not absolute. One reason this case remains intriguing is the relatively recent timeline of extinction. Unlike species lost millions of years ago, the Caribbean monk seal lived well into the 20th century. Photographs exist, written descriptions are detailed, older fishermen may have personally seen them in youth. Extinction feels less distant, less abstract. Culturally, the Caribbean monk seal has become a symbol of tropical biodiversity loss. Coral reefs and coastal ecosystems face intense modern pressures from overfishing, climate change, pollution, and tourism. The disappearance of a native seal species reflects broader ecological stress. Some conservationists argue that hope for survival, however slim, can motivate marine protection efforts. Protecting remote reefs and coastal zones benefits numerous species regardless of monk seal status. Others caution that focusing on improbable survival may distract from protecting species still demonstrably alive. The ecological role of the Caribbean monk seal likely included regulating fish populations and contributing nutrients to coastal systems. Its removal altered predator-prey dynamics. Apex and mesopredators in marine ecosystems shape community structure. Losing even a moderately sized marine mammal can have cascading effects. If a small surviving population existed, its ecological impact would be measurable in certain areas. Repeated surveys have not identified such patterns. Still, uncertainty persists at the edges. Deep ocean species are often rediscovered after presumed extinction, but monk seals are not deep ocean dwellers. They depend on accessible shorelines. This increases the improbability of hidden survival. However, consider human observational bias. Extinction declarations often follow periods of declining observation effort. As a species becomes rare, search intensity may decrease due to funding limitations or shifting priorities. Absence of evidence can partly reflect absence of sustained investigation. The official declaration in 2008 followed extensive review of historical data and survey attempts. The consensus was that extinction was the most probable conclusion. Yet science uses probability, not absolute proof. There is no preserved record of the final individual's death, no documented moment when the last monk seal slipped beneath the surface. Instead, there is a gradual fading of reports, a thinning of sightings, and finally silence. This pattern mirrors many marine extinctions. The Caribbean monk seal also highlights the vulnerability of island and coastal species. Isolation can promote specialization, but it also magnifies risk. Once human exploitation begins, recovery may be impossible without early intervention. If, hypothetically, a remnant population survived in a remote bank or protected reef system, it would represent one of the most extraordinary rediscoveries in marine biology. Immediate conservation measures would be critical. Genetic analysis would determine diversity levels. Breeding programs might be considered. But until evidence emerges, survival remains speculative. The broader lesson extends beyond one species. Marine ecosystems are less visible than terrestrial ones. Extinction in the ocean often occurs quietly. Without dramatic carcasses or visible habitat destruction, species can vanish with little public awareness. The Caribbean monk seal reminds us that extinction is not always witnessed. It often unfolds out of sight, beneath waves, and beyond headlines. Whether truly gone or lingering in some uncharted reef, the species embodies the fragility of tropical marine life under human pressure. If it is extinct, it stands as a warning. If, by some improbable chance, it survives, it would stand as proof that the ocean still guards secrets. Either way, its story reinforces a central theme of this documentary. Extinction is a conclusion drawn from evidence, but the planet is vast and our observation is incomplete. And sometimes, in the quiet spaces between data and certainty, possibility remains. The saber-tooth legacy and unknown predators. More than 10,000 years ago, during the final chapters of the last ice age, massive cats with elongated canine teeth stalked across North and South America. Among them, the most famous was Smilodon, commonly called the saber-toothed tiger, though it was not a true tiger at all. It was a distinct lineage of felid, built powerfully, with forelimbs designed for grappling prey and upper canines that could exceed 20 centimeters in length. Smilodon fatalis vanished near the end of the Pleistocene, likely due to a combination of climate shifts, ecosystem change, and human expansion. Its extinction aligns with the broader megafaunal collapse that eliminated mammoths, giant ground sloths, and many other large animals. Scientifically, the saber-toothed cat is extinct. Its fossil record ends. No confirmed remains exist from the Holocene era. And yet, the idea of surviving saber-tooths continues to surface in reports from remote regions of the world. To approach this rationally, we must first understand the biology of Smilodon and related saber-tooth species. These cats were not subtle predators. They were large, muscular, and likely social, or at least semi-social. Fossil evidence from La Brea tar pits in California reveals numerous individuals preserved together, suggesting group behavior. Their prey consisted of large herbivores, animals that themselves disappeared at the end of the Ice Age. The extinction of prey species alone would have destabilized saber-tooth populations. Large predators require substantial energy intake. Without abundant megafauna, survival would be difficult. So how did the myth of surviving saber-tooths arise? Throughout the 20th century, explorers and local communities in parts of South America and Africa reported sightings of unusually large cats with exaggerated canine teeth. In the Amazon rainforest, stories of massive feline predators unknown to science occasionally emerged. Some described cats larger than jaguars, with strange facial features. Cryptozoologists have proposed that isolated pockets of Pleistocene predators could have survived in remote jungle environments. The Amazon basin is immense, spanning millions of square kilometers. Dense canopy and limited infrastructure historically made exploration difficult. However, biological plausibility weakens the claim. Saber-tooth cats evolved alongside large Ice Age herbivores. Their specialized elongated canines were adapted for specific hunting strategies, likely involving ambush and rapid dispatch of large prey. Modern rainforest ecosystems differ significantly from Pleistocene grasslands and open woodlands. Prey size distribution, habitat structure, and competition dynamics have changed. Modern big cats such as jaguars, leopards, and mountain lions occupy available predator niches. If a large saber-tooth lineage survived, it would compete directly with these established species. Ecological displacement would leave measurable evidence in prey populations and predator interaction. No such evidence has emerged, yet unexplained large feline sightings persist globally. In parts of Africa, reports of enormous unknown cats occasionally surface, sometimes described with unusually long teeth. In North America, reports of mysterious large cats beyond known species occasionally circulate, though most are attributed to misidentified cougars or escaped exotic animals. Human perception plays a significant role here. Large predators evoke strong emotional responses. In dense forest environments, visibility is limited. Brief glimpses, partial silhouettes, and movement in shadow can exaggerate perceived size and features. Fear sharpens imagination. Memory reshapes detail. Evolutionary psychology also contributes. Humans evolved alongside large predators. Our brains are highly sensitive to feline shapes and movements. Ambiguity often resolves into predator imagery under stress. But the persistence of these reports raises a broader question. Could unknown large predator species exist today, even if not Pleistocene saber-tooths? The answer is more nuanced. New large mammal discoveries in modern times are rare but not impossible. However, completely unknown apex predators of substantial size are extremely unlikely to remain undetected for long. Large carnivores require extensive territories. They leave tracks, scat, kills, and carcasses. They interact with prey species, in measurable ways. Camera traps deployed worldwide have revealed elusive species, but they have not revealed undiscovered saber-tooth-like cats. Another angle involves evolutionary convergence. While Smilodon is extinct, the concept of elongated canines is not unique to that lineage. Various carnivorous mammals in evolutionary history independently developed enlarged canines for specialized hunting. Theoretically, a modern species could evolve unusual dental morphology under specific ecological pressures. But such evolution would require significant time and isolation. No modern felid shows signs of re-evolving extreme saber-tooth characteristics. The saber-tooth myth also intersects with deep time misinterpretation. Sometimes, large fossil discoveries near human settlements spark rumors of living counterparts. Ancient bones unearthed in caves or riverbanks can inspire stories of surviving giants. Before paleontology matured as a science, such discoveries often fueled belief in living relics. Today, scientific understanding of Pleistocene extinction is robust. Climate transitions at the end of the last glacial maximum reshaped ecosystems dramatically. Combined with expanding human hunting pressure, many large mammals disappeared within a relatively short evolutionary window. The saber-toothed cat, likely, could not adapt quickly enough to these changes, but there is a subtle distinction worth exploring. While classic saber-tooths are extinct, modern ecosystems may still harbor undiscovered predator diversity at smaller scales. Remote mountain ranges, dense rainforests, and isolated islands sometimes reveal new subspecies or cryptic species of carnivores. These discoveries do not overturn paleontology, but they remind us that biodiversity remains incompletely catalogued. For example, new small carnivores have been identified in recent decades through genetic analysis rather than direct observation. This cryptic species can resemble known animals closely, differing primarily in DNA. Could a large, unknown cat species exist undiscovered in the Amazon? Biologically, this is highly improbable, but not absolutely impossible. However, a true saber-tooth descendant surviving from the Pleistocene would require a continuous, stable breeding population across thousands of years without leaving fossil or genetic evidence in recent sediments. The absence of recent remains is decisive. Like sharks, large mammals leave bones when they die. These bones accumulate in sediments. Paleontologists have extensively studied Holocene deposits across continents. No saber-tooth remains appear beyond the late Pleistocene boundary. The saber-tooth case therefore differs from species like the thylacine or ivory-billed woodpecker. Those animals lived into the modern era and vanished recently. Smilodon disappeared thousands of years ago. Yet it remains part of this exploration because it represents how extinction intersects with myth and modern uncertainty. It illustrates how prehistoric imagery persists in human consciousness. It shows how deep time creatures can blur into contemporary reports when evidence is ambiguous. The psychological power of the saber-tooth cannot be overstated. Elongated canines symbolize primal danger. They exaggerate the predator archetype embedded in human imagination. When people report unusually large cats, the saber-tooth image often surfaces implicitly. In reality, Modern big cats continue to dominate their respective ecosystems effectively without prehistoric features. Evolutionary success does not require extreme morphology. The great white shark does not need Megalodon scale to function as an apex predator. The lion does not need saber-tooth fangs to rule the savannah. Extinction in the case of Smilodon appears final, based on overwhelming fossil and ecological evidence. However, the broader theme persists. Large predators shape ecosystems profoundly. When they vanish, ecological balance shifts. Their absence leaves gaps that other species partially fill. Sometimes, those gaps spark imagination, leading people to wonder whether something ancient still lingers in the shadows. While saber-toothed cats almost certainly do not survive, the question highlights a deeper truth. Our planet once supported creatures far more dramatic than many alive today. Their disappearance reminds us that extinction can remove dominant apex species entirely. And when such creatures vanish, the world changes permanently. The saber-tooth legacy is not survival in hidden valleys. It is the reminder that extinction reshapes evolutionary history decisively. Yet, as long as remote forests remain unexplored and human perception remains imperfect, stories of ancient predators will continue to circulate, not because they are likely true, but because extinction, especially of giants, is difficult for the human mind to fully accept. Lazarus species creatures that came back. Extinction is often spoken of as irreversible. Once a species is declared gone, it is placed into history, into fossil records and museum archives. Textbooks are updated. Conservation priorities shift. Funding is redirected towards species that still have a chance. And yet, throughout modern scientific history, extinction has occasionally been overturned. These reversals are not myths. They are documented, verified, and transformative. They remind us that scientific conclusions, even careful ones, operate within the limits of available data. When new evidence appears, those conclusions must adapt. Species once declared extinct that are later rediscovered are known as Lazarus species. The term reflects the biblical story of resurrection, but in biological terms it refers to rediscovery after presumed disappearance. One of the most famous examples is the coelacanth. For millions of years, coelacanth fossils appeared in ancient marine sediments. Paleontologists believed the lineage had vanished at the end of the Cretaceous period, around 66 million years ago. It was considered a relic of deep time, part of a prehistoric marine ecosystem that no longer existed. Then, in 1938, off the coast of South Africa, a fisherman hauled in a strange, heavy fish with lobed fins unlike any modern species known locally. Museum curator Marjorie Courtenay-Latimer examined the specimen and recognized its significance. It was a living coelacanth. A lineage believed extinct for tens of millions of years had survived unnoticed in deep waters. Subsequent research revealed that coelacanths inhabit deep marine environments, often below 200 meters, where routine fishing rarely occurs. Their rediscovery fundamentally altered assumptions about marine extinction and survival. The coelacanth case demonstrates a key principle. Absence from the fossil record beyond a certain time does not always mean extinction at that time. Fossilization is rare. Deep-sea environments preserve fewer fossils than shallow marine zones. Survival in underexplored habitats can obscure living populations. Another example is the takahe of New Zealand. This large, flightless bird was thought extinct by the late 19th century after intense hunting and habitat loss for nearly 50 years. No confirmed sightings occurred. Then, in 1948, a small population was discovered in remote alpine valleys. Today, the takahe survives through intensive conservation management. The ivory-billed woodpecker debate echoes this possibility, though not yet conclusively rediscovered. The precedent of the takahe shows that large birds can remain undetected in remote terrain longer than expected. Plants also exhibit Lazarus patterns. The Wollemi pine, discovered in Australia in 1994, was known only from fossil records dating back over 90 million years. When living specimens were found in a remote canyon, it shocked botanists worldwide. The species had survived in isolated pockets, hidden within difficult-to-access terrain. These cases are not common, but they are real. What unites Lazarus species is not magic, but geography. Remote habitats, extreme environments, and low detection probability allow survival beyond human awareness. Rediscovery often occurs when exploration technology improves, or when chance encounters bring hidden species into view. However, not all extinction reversals are dramatic deep-time events like the coelacanth. Sometimes, species declared extinct in recent centuries are rediscovered after decades of absence. Small mammals, amphibians, and insects have reappeared after being presumed gone. These rediscoveries often involve species with limited ranges or cryptic behavior. The mountain pygmy possum in Australia, for example, was known only from fossil remains before living individuals were found in alpine habitats. Similarly, certain frog species, thought extinct due to disease outbreaks, have been rediscovered in isolated streams. These examples challenge rigid timelines. Extinction is typically declared after extensive surveys fail to find a species over a defined period. Statistical models estimate the probability of survival based on detection efforts. When that probability drops below a threshold, extinction is inferred, but models depend on assumptions. If surveys miss key habitats, if behavior changes reduce detectability, or if populations retreat into refuges, extinction can be declared prematurely. Lazarus species expose these vulnerabilities. However, it is critical to maintain perspective. The vast majority of species declared extinct remain extinct. Rediscoveries are rare exceptions, not the rule. Romanticizing survival without evidence can undermine scientific rigor. Hope must be balanced with data. The coelacanth survived because its habitat was deep and rarely sampled. The takahe survived because remote alpine valleys remained largely unexplored. The Wollemi pine persisted in inaccessible canyon systems. What these cases share is ecological refuge. For a species to survive unnoticed, it must inhabit a space that humans rarely penetrate, and it must require relatively modest ecological resources. Large predators with extensive territorial needs are less likely to escape detection than small, localized species. This distinction matters when evaluating claims of survival for creatures like Megalodon or saber-tooth cats. The larger and more ecologically dominant a species is, the harder it is to hide. Lazarus species tend to be specialized, reclusive, or geographically constrained. The psychological impact of rediscovery is profound. When a species believed lost reappears, it generates renewed conservation energy. Funding flows, habitat protection intensifies, public engagement increases. Rediscovery can reverse ecological pessimism, demonstrating that resilience is possible. Yet rediscovery also reveals fragility. Many Lazarus species survive in extremely small populations. Genetic diversity is often low. Habitat remains limited. Without immediate conservation action, rediscovered species can still slip into permanent extinction. Survival beyond declaration does not guarantee recovery. Another subtle point emerges from Lazarus species. Extinction is rarely a single moment. It is a process that unfolds unevenly across geography. A species may disappear from most of its range, while persisting in a few refuges. Observers focusing on former strongholds may assume extinction, unaware of scattered survivors elsewhere. This spatial unevenness complicates certainty. Modern tools such as environmental DNA, remote sensing, automated acoustic recorders, and satellite telemetry have improved detection dramatically. These technologies reduce the likelihood of premature extinction declarations. Yet, they are not universally deployed, especially in politically unstable or financially constrained regions. The rediscovery of Lazarus species reminds scientists to approach extinction with humility. It reinforces the importance of continued monitoring even after long periods without sightings. But it also reinforces caution. For every coelacanth rediscovered, countless species truly vanish. The fossil record documents 5 major mass extinctions in Earth's history. Modern biodiversity loss is accelerating under human influence. Rediscovery should not obscure the scale of irreversible loss. Instead, Lazarus species offer 2 complementary lessons. First, scientific conclusions must remain open to revision when new evidence emerges. Second, conservation should prioritize habitats even when target species are presumed extinct. Protecting ecosystems preserves unknown biodiversity as well. In the context of this documentary, Lazarus species serve as anchors of credibility. They demonstrate that extinction is sometimes declared prematurely. They show that life can persist in hidden refuges beyond expectation. But they also clarify boundaries. Rediscovery requires evidence, photographs, specimens, genetic confirmation. Until such evidence appears, survival remains hypothetical. The existence of Lazarus species does not validate every claim of hidden survival. It does not prove that every extinct creature might still live. It simply confirms that certainty in biology is rarely absolute. In a world still being explored, rediscovery remains possible. And in that possibility lies both hope and responsibility. Hope that some lost threads of biodiversity may still be woven into living ecosystems. The responsibility to protect habitats even when the species we seek may no longer be there. Extinction may often be final, but sometimes, unexpectedly, life persists. What extinction really means in a hidden world. Extinction is often presented as a line. On one side of the line, a species exists. It breathes, feeds, reproduces, adapts. On the other side, it does not. The line appears sharp and definitive, like a switch, flipped permanently off. Once crossed, there is no return. But in reality, extinction is rarely a clean boundary. It is a fading. Species decline gradually. Populations fragment, habitats shrink, individuals become scattered across disconnected refuges, sightings grow rare, evidence becomes thin. Eventually, scientists stop finding proof of survival. At that point, extinction is declared. Yet the final individual almost never dies under observation. No one witnessed the last thylacine exhale in the wild. No researcher documented the final ivory-billed woodpecker nesting in its natural habitat. No marine biologist recorded the last Caribbean monk seal slipping beneath the waves. Extinction is inferred, not observed. This gap between inference and finality is where uncertainty lives. Earth is not fully mapped in biological terms. Dense rainforests conceal valleys untouched by systematic surveys. Deep ocean trenches descend into darkness beyond routine exploration. Remote mountain ranges remain sparsely visited. Even well-studied regions can harbor cryptic species that evade detection. In such a world, absolute certainty is rare. Modern science relies on probability. When repeated surveys over extended timeframes fail to find a species, models estimate the likelihood that it still survives. When that likelihood becomes extremely small, extinction is declared. This approach is rational and necessary. Conservation planning requires clarity, but probability is not zero. This distinction is subtle yet important. Extinction means that, based on current evidence, survival is overwhelmingly unlikely. It does not mean that every square kilometer of habitat has been searched continuously. It does not mean that every cave, trench, or canyon has been inspected. The planet's complexity exceeds our observational capacity. However, uncertainty must not be confused with denial. Many species are unquestionably gone. The fossil record documents vast turnovers in biodiversity. Modern extinction rates are accelerating under climate change, habitat destruction, pollution, and overexploitation. Extinction is not a myth created by incomplete knowledge. It is a measurable and ongoing reality. The tension lies between humility and evidence. Humility recognizes that knowledge is incomplete. Evidence anchors conclusions in data rather than hope. Throughout this documentary, we have explored creatures that occupy this tension. The thylacine lingers in reports from Tasmanian wilderness. The ivory-billed woodpecker flickers between blurred footage and skepticism. The Megalodon captures imagination but collides with fossil reality. The quagga blurs extinction through genetic continuity. The moa reflect how rapidly humans can erase giants. The Caribbean monk seal fades into uncertain waters. The saber-tooth survives only in legend. Lazarus species demonstrate that rediscovery is possible. Each case reveals a different dimension of extinction. Some challenge scientific timelines, others challenge philosophical definitions, some expose psychological biases, others reaffirm ecological limits. Together, they illustrate that extinction is both biological and conceptual. Biologically, extinction is the permanent loss of a lineage. Once no breeding individuals remain, that unique evolutionary path ends. No future adaptation can continue from it. Millions of years of genetic experimentation vanish. Conceptually, extinction is an assessment made by observers working within limits. This dual nature creates friction. Consider how extinction intersects with technology. In the 19th century, species were declared extinct based on sporadic field observations. Today, camera traps monitor forests continuously. Acoustic sensors record nocturnal calls. Satellites map habitat change in real time. Environmental DNA can detect trace genetic material in water and soil. These tools reduce uncertainty dramatically. Yet even with advanced technology, coverage remains incomplete. Political instability, funding constraints, and logistical barriers limit deployment in many regions. Some ecosystems remain undersurveyed simply because they are difficult to access. Deep ocean ecosystems illustrate this clearly. Despite decades of marine research, vast portions remain unexplored. New species are described every year. However, most discoveries involve small or mid-sized organisms rather than giant apex predators. Size matters in detectability. Large animals require larger populations and broader territories. Their ecological impact is harder to conceal. This is why survival claims for enormous prehistoric creatures face steep skepticism, while small amphibians or insects may genuinely reappear after presumed extinction. Extinction also intersects with memory. Human cultures preserve stories of animals long after their disappearance. Folklore may exaggerate features or merge species into mythic forms. Yet sometimes, oral traditions contain kernels of ecological truth. Memory can outlast presence. The challenge lies in distinguishing narrative from evidence. Another layer involves de-extinction technologies. Genome editing and synthetic biology raise the possibility of recreating extinct forms. If scientists reconstruct an organism genetically similar to an extinct species, does that reverse extinction? Or does it create a new entity inspired by the old? The quagga case suggests that extinction may sometimes be softened by genetic continuity, but full restoration of lost lineages remains scientifically complex and ethically debated. Even if technology advances, ecological restoration is not guaranteed. Habitats may have changed irreversibly. Climate conditions may differ from historical baselines. Resurrected organisms may struggle in modern ecosystems. Extinction, therefore, is not only about individuals, it is about ecological context. When a species disappears, it takes relationships with it. Predator-prey interactions, pollination networks, seed dispersal pathways, nutrient cycling roles. Even if an organism were recreated, the web around it may no longer exist. So what does extinction really mean? It means vulnerability. It means that evolutionary success does not guarantee permanence. Dominant species can vanish within centuries. Giants can fall. Ecosystems can transform rapidly. It also means responsibility. Humans now influence planetary systems at unprecedented scale. Climate, oceans, forests, and atmospheric chemistry are shaped by human activity. Extinction in the modern era is rarely purely natural. It is intertwined with our actions. Uncertainty should not be an excuse for inaction. The possibility that a species might survive in hidden refuges does not diminish the urgency of conservation. On the contrary, it strengthens it. Protecting habitats preserves not only known biodiversity, but unknown and unconfirmed life as well. The hidden world is not romantic abstraction. It is a reminder that life persists beyond immediate visibility. However, we must resist the temptation to let mystery overshadow evidence. A hope without data can mislead. Denial of extinction can undermine conservation focus. Balancing curiosity with rigor is essential. Extinction is both final and uncertain. Final in its biological consequence when confirmed, uncertain in its detection until evidence settles debate. In a hidden world, humility is necessary. We must acknowledge what we do not know, but humility must operate alongside scientific discipline. Some species discussed here are almost certainly gone forever. Others occupy slim margins of possibility. A few may yet surprise us. What unites them is the lesson that extinction is not merely a historical footnote. It is an ongoing process shaped by ecology, climate, and human behavior. The world still holds secrets. Not necessarily prehistoric giants lurking beneath waves, but undiscovered species, fragile populations, and ecological interactions not yet fully understood. In the end, extinction forces us to confront limits of knowledge, limits of resilience, limits of time. Whether certain creatures survive in remote corners or not, the deeper truth remains unchanged. Life on Earth is both astonishingly durable and profoundly vulnerable. Extinction is not always witnessed, and sometimes it is declared too soon. But when it truly occurs, it is irreversible. The hidden world may conceal surprises, but it cannot conceal loss forever.